Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV. We're taking a look today at 3 new controllers from 8Bitdo that attempt to replicate the original TurboGrafx and PC Engine controllers, but with a modern twist. Pretty attractive looking devices. Now these were designed to work with the new TurboGrafx and PC Engine mini consoles, but I don't own one of those, so when they came in, I hooked them up to a bunch of other stuff, and I found they do work with a lot of platforms, including the PC, the Raspberry Pi, the MiSTer, and we're going to look at how these controllers work with all those platforms in this review. Now, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that these came in free of charge from 8Bitdo. However, all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor is anyone reviewing or approving what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what these new controllers are all about. Now, these are very reasonably priced, only $25 a piece. So let's take a look now at the hardware. You've got 3 different color options available. They've got one modeled after the PC Engine Core Edition, another one modeled after the PC Engine, the original, and then they have one modeled after the North American TurboGrafx 16. The functionality of the controllers is the same no matter which color you choose, so it's a matter of preference, or perhaps whichever mini console you are looking to match it up with. In the box, you also get a 2.4 gigahertz wireless receiver. Note that these controllers are not Bluetooth. They only work with the receiver here, and they will work a little differently when you're plugging them in directly versus using the receiver. And I'll show you what that means in a few minutes, especially if you plan to plug this into a PC. But again, they do work with other platforms, which is great. Now, the controllers themselves look a lot like the original TurboGrafx and PC Engine controllers, but they're a little bit more rounded. So on the right there is a public domain image of the original. I have an original somewhere, but I couldn't find it this morning. The big difference is that you don't have a turbo switch for adjusting the speed of the turbo. So what you've got instead are turbo buttons above the main buttons here. So these 2 buttons are mapped to the 2 and the 1 that you would have on the original. And then if you want turbo, instead of flicking a switch, you have to push the button above it. So that might take a little bit of getting used to. I did not find a way to vary the rate of turbo on these 2 buttons, so they're kind of locked in. And when we plug it into the PC, you'll see the differences there. But these buttons can't be mapped to anything else. They are basically turbo versions of the buttons down here at the bottom. So that's the one big change there. The only additional button you get here is a home button, and you can map this to do whatever you want on other platforms. On the Switch, this will pull up the home menu on that console. There's no shoulder buttons, which will present an issue on the Switch, no doubt. So you don't have a lot of extra buttons here. Again, these are really designed to work with those TurboGrafx mini consoles, but I think you can, again, make them work in other scenarios there. On the top here is a USB connector. This is a micro USB connector. This is what you'll use to charge the controller. Battery life on these is pretty good. I didn't see any real differences between this one and other 8Bitdo controllers. Now, if you plug this directly into a PC or a Raspberry Pi, you can use it in wired mode, which will result in slightly better input latency versus the wireless dongle. So you do have a good choice of input connections here. So what we're going to do now is get my PC out. We're going to plug it into there and see how it works when you plug it in directly and when you use the wireless dongle. And then we'll take a look at a few other platforms too. So let's have a look at that. All right, so we've got my gaming laptop out here, and I've got 2 controllers connected to it. So this one is connected wirelessly with the 8Bitdo dongle. You can see that we've got it lit up blue here to indicate that it's got that connection. The other controller here is connected directly via USB to the computer. Now, what's interesting is that when this one's connected, again, directly with the USB cable, it will show up as an X input device. This is a fun little app that's free and in the Windows App Store called Game Controller Tester, and it only works with X input devices. And as you can see here, it's detecting 1 controller and not 2, even though we have 2 attached. Now on the X input side, it will map the directional pad here to the left thumbstick. Of course, you don't get analog controls with this, and you can't push it down to get a trigger push either. So this is pretty much just going to be a digital connection here, which isn't bad if you can map your controls out properly. On the buttons here, it's mapping to B and A on the Xbox controller. And if I push it down once, you can see that it just lights up. but if I hold this button down, it will give us a turbo response. So that is pretty much how those buttons map out. Select and start map out to where you would expect them to. The home button here I would think would give us the Xbox button, but it doesn't do that at all. And of course you have no shoulder buttons here to speak of, so that is pretty much the compatibility there. Now what I want to do is bring out my other little window here. This is the Windows direct input settings, and if we take out the controller here, you can see that the D-pad is mapped to the point of view hat here. So that's going to map there, and again, you can't change any of this stuff. And I'm guessing it's mapping this way because this is what the TurboGrafx Mini console expects to see. And then this button is button 2 on direct input. This one is button 3, and again, the turbo works like that. Now, while the home button doesn't work on the X input side, at least in that Game Tester application, it does work in direct input, and it actually gives you 2 button pushes for the price of 1. So if I go here and just tap on that home button, you can see it lights up positions 9 and 10 here on direct input. So that's what you can expect on the PC side. I haven't found any issues with any of the emulators I was playing with getting these controllers to map properly, but your mileage may vary, especially if you've got something that doesn't work with direct input. It's not going to work here, but if it only supports X input, if you plug the controller in directly, it will work just fine. Let's take a look now at a few other platforms I plugged it into for compatibility. So let's start off with RetroPi on the Raspberry Pi. We were running some TurboGrafx 16 games on there. Everything worked great when we were connected directly with the USB cable, and it also worked great when we had just the wireless dongle connected. So either way, you can map your controls and you'll be good to go there. So good stuff. We also tested the MiSTer, the FPGA console that I am quite fond of, and both modes work there too. So you can see it here running with a wired connection, no problem. And then when we brought the dongle in, it also continued to work just fine. Again, you just have to map out the controls when you first plug things in, so no issues on the MiSTer either. And then we also plugged it into the Nintendo Switch, which of course it says it works with, and sure enough, it did, both wired and wirelessly. Now on the Switch, the 2 button is going to map to B, and the other button, the I button, will map to A. And then, of course, the home button will take you back home, and the turbo buttons will work as they do on other platforms. One thing to note on the Switch, though, especially if you're going to play some of those NES games on here, you don't have the shoulder buttons and the shoulder trigger buttons to bring up some of the menus and other things that you might encounter within the Switch interface. So there might be some constraints that you run into on that side just due to a lack of buttons, but overall it did seem to work fine across all of the platforms that we plugged it into here. And the gameplay experience overall on the controller feels pretty good. It reminds me a lot of my TurboGrafx 16 controller that I can't find at the moment. The placement of the buttons and D-pad are great here. I'm not getting any real errant diagonals as I go left to right here on the D-pad. It all feels very precise, and no real concerns here whatsoever with the actual gameplay. Now, we also tested input latency on these controllers using my iPhone. We shoot the screen at 240 frames per second. We push the button and see how long it takes for that button push to get registered on screen. The best controllers we've looked at typically come in around 44 milliseconds, give or take, on a 144 hertz display. That's what these came in at when they were plugged in directly with the cable. Wirelessly, you're seeing about a 15 to 20 millisecond increase in input latency. Not bad, especially given that that's generally what I see with the Nintendo Pro controller on the Switch. So overall, input latency is as low as it can be on one of these controllers, and it will be among the best out there. So overall, these are great controllers from 8Bitdo. It's great to see them interpreting the PC Engine and TurboGrafx designs. And it would have been great to get a little bit more button functionality out of this, namely having some shoulder buttons or something to at least do a little bit more on the modern side with them. But if you are looking to play some of these TurboGrafx 16 games on your RetroPi or on your PC, it's great to be able to do it with a controller that largely feels the same as the original because all of the controls are in the right place. The only thing you're going to have to get used to is the location of those 2 turbo buttons. Again, on the original controllers, you had a switch, and those turbo settings would apply to the buttons in their regular position. But beyond that, it feels very nice, and another well-constructed device here from 8Bitdo, and I'm a big fan of what they do. So that's going to do it for now. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Rick Vestudo, Chris Allegretta, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.